The jungle heat pressed thick around the training grounds as Captain Elias Varick stepped onto the soil that smelled of blood and smoke from older wars. His boots sank slightly into the dirt, and he looked up at the looming stone walls that kept the predator cubs contained. His orders had been clear. He was here to teach them human war games. The cubs gathered with eyes that glowed like molten amber and bodies already larger than most grown men. They stood on four limbs at first, then rose to two. Their voices rumbled with challenge and disdain. They were the Clearothy future heirs of a warrior, species bred for claw and fawn, not patience or strategy. Their bodies carried muscle that twitched with restless hunger, but their minds were still untamed. One cub pushed forward, chest broad, shoulders thick for a streak with dark markings. He was Arichitor, the boldest of the group. His jaw snapped as he spoke his words guttural, yet sharp with youthful arrogance. "Show us human weak games, little man." The other cubs laughed, deep resonant sounds that echoed off the walls. Elias did not flinch. He had fought battles against men and against things far worse. He had seen arrogance before he saw in Arichitor something more than pride, though. He saw hunger to prove dominance, to crush whatever stood before him. Elias let the silence stretch until the cubs shifted with unease. Then he spoke, his voice low, but cutting through their derision. "You know strength and muscle, but you know nothing of strength and mind." From the edge of the grounds, another figure observed. Caver, one of the adult Clearothy instructors. His body was massive, a tower of fur, and scars his arms, crossed his eyes, narrowing with disdain. He had opposed this assignment from the beginning. To him, human tactics were cowardice. To him, honor meant direct confrontation, and a hide or trick was shameful. He rumbled, "You will waste their time, human. They are predators, not prey." Elias ignored him. His attention stayed on the cubs. He dropped a small pack on the ground and pulled out colored bands, red and blue. He handed them out one by one as the cubs inspected the alien objects with suspicion. He explained, "These bands mark teams. Today you will play war as humans. Do no killing, no blood. This is about winning with thought, not with claws." The cubs growled in complaint. They wanted blood. They wanted combat, yet something in the calm authority of Elias' voice made them hesitate. Arichitor took the band, wrapping it around his thick wrist. His eyes locked on Elias with challenge. "And if I win by tearing them down with strength." Elias stepped closer, looking up at the towering cub. "Then you lose." Confusion flickered across Arichitor. Faced the concept of losing by winning unsettled him. Elias seized a moment. He outlined the rules: 2 teams, 2 bases marked by banners. The goal, to capture the enemy banner and return it without being caught. Any who were touched within the enemy zone were out. No killing, no claws, no teeth. The cub scoffed, and Caver shook his head, muttering about wasted time. The game began. Arichitor roared, charging forward with raw force. His teammates followed like a storm. Their strategy was none, their intent pure. Overwhelmed, the opposing team scattered, and Elias watched as chaos swallowed them. Within minutes, the red banner was torn down. Arichitor lifted it high with triumph. Victory, he declared. Elias raised a hand. "No, you broke the rules. The banner is useless if your team is all scattered and caught." The cubs froze, staring. Elias explained patiently, "Victory is not strength alone. It is discipline. It is knowing where your allies are. It is knowing when to retreat and when to strike." He looked at the cubs, each in turn. Their breathing slowed. Their confusion gave way to curiosity. A small seed had been planted. Caver barked a laugh. "Foolishness, they learn nothing but tricks." Elias glanced at him without expression. "Tricks are what let humans survive when be stronger and faster than us. One has gone. Tricks become tactics, and tactics become victory." The cubs demanded another round this time. They tried to listen. They tried to spread out to guard their banner. They stumbled in their coordination, forgetting signals or charging too early. Elias corrected them calmly. His voice never rose, yet carried command. They failed again and again, but with each failure their eyes burned brighter, not with rage, but with realization. Arichitor especially watched Elias with a strange fascination. He repeated words Elias had spoken: discipline, precision, patience. The words sounded foreign in his throat, yet carried weight each time. He tried to mimic the strategies. His pride battled with curiosity. He wanted to win by claw, but he also wanted to understand. As the sun bled across the horizon, the cubs had played 5 rounds. Each time they improved. They shouted less, roared less, began to move with intent. Instead of instinct, their games looked clumsy still. But within the clumsiness, Elias saw transformation. The predators were beginning to learn. Caver stepped forward at last, his shadow looming across the dirt. "Enough you have filled their heads with weakness. Tomorrow we will show them true combat, and they will see your games are worthless. I will make sure the council sees it." The cubs bristled, but Elias only nodded. He looked at Arichitor, whose chest heaved with exertion, but whose eyes gleamed with something fiercer than arrogance. Elias spoke softly, So only the cub heard, "Tomorrow is not about strength tomorrow. It's about proving you can think beyond the hunt." R.H. gave no answer. His jaw clenched. He turned back to his peers, rallying them with growls and commands, words already carrying a rhythm that sounded eerily human. Elias knew. Then the seed was growing faster than expected. Night fell over the training ground. The walls held the cubs within, but their minds were no longer caged. R.H. lay awake, replaying the games, imagining paths, ambushes, signals. He did not yet know why his chest burned with anticipation, but he knew tomorrow he would face adults, and he would use the strange human ways. Elias stood alone beneath the dark sky, his eyes lifted to the alien stars, and he thought of Earth, where children once played games that became the bones of empires. He allowed a small, grim smile to cross his lips. Tomorrow the predators would learn what humanity had always known: games were never just games. The dawn came with a sharp chill across the training ground, and the cubs stirred restless and eager. Their breaths steamed in the cool air, and their muscles twitched with hunger not for food, but for the trial promised. A day before Captain Elias Varick stood waiting, his uniform marked by dust from yesterday, yet his posture steady and unbroken. His gaze was fixed on the cubs, each of them taller, stronger, deadlier than any human child, but he saw not their size. He saw their potential. He saw the fire of minds just beginning to awaken. R.H. emerged first from the stone den, shoulders squared, for still ruffled from sleep, his golden eyes burned with restless energy. He looked at Elias without the mockery that had marked his first words yesterday. Instead, his voice carried challenge, laced with curiosity. "You said we failed because we were beasts without thought. Teach us again. Humans, show me how to win with more than claw." Elias nodded and motioned for the cubs to gather. He spoke slowly with weight in each word. "Yesterday you charged like storms, and storms may frighten, but storms cannot hold shape. Victory requires more than rage, it requires design." He drew lines in the dirt with a stick, marking circles and arrows. The cubs leaned closer, squinting at the crude map. Their instinct urged them to leap, but their minds bent toward this strange new art. Architor traced one line with a claw and asked, "This line means retreat." Elias gave a single sharp nod. "Retreat is not defeat. Retreat is survival until strike is certain." The word survival rolled strangely in Architor's mouth, yet it lingered. From the shadow of the wall, Caver watched, arms crossed, massive chest rising with disdain. His voice broke through like a growl. "You poison them with cowardice to turn from battle. It is shameful to wait as weakness." Elias did not look at him. His focus remained on the cubs. "To survive is never shame. To die foolishly is." The cubs rumbled, uncertain, torn between the ancient pride of their kind and the sharp clarity of human thought. Training began again. This time Elias arranged them into two groups, not for mindless charge, but for roles. One group was bait to draw the enemy, the other hidden in cover, waiting to strike at the distracted foe. The cubs struggled, their roars too loud, their movements too fast. Ambush failed as opponents caught their scent too soon. Elias made them run again and again. He forced them to slow, forced them to whisper signals, forced them to hold claws until the perfect moment. Frustration boiled in R.H.'s chest. He growled, ready to abandon the patience demanded, yet each failure burned him deeper, and each repetition carved new understanding. The moment came when he gave a signal. At the right time, his hidden group leapt upon the unsuspecting rivals, and for the first time the game ended with discipline. Not chaos. His roar of triumph shook the air, but this roar was not wild. It was controlled, a declaration of victory earned through mind. The other cubs looked at him with all the spark of leadership shown in his stance. Elias saw it and said quietly, "A leader does not roar first. A leader waits. A leader thinks. A leader makes others roar with him." Architor repeated the words under his breath, tasting them like prey. He did not know yet, but the words rooted deep. Caver approached, snarling, "Enough games. These are children of hunters, not schemers. They will face us tomorrow, and you will see their disgrace." His words carried venom, but the cubs did not echo him. Instead, they stood taller, eyes burning with desire to prove him wrong. Elias used the rest of the day to drill them in signals, hand signs, claw marks, and dirt. He made them use false trails and decoys. He forced them to guard banner while pretending weakness, drawing enemies in close. Before striking, the cubs roared less and whispered more. They still stumbled, but when they stumbled, they learned. They still failed, but their failures were shaped into sharper blades. R.H.A. took command, naturally shouting orders that echoed Elias. Phrasing, he pointed, he signaled, he corrected his peers with sharp authority. His arrogance bent into something fiercer than pride. It bent into leadership. As dusk bled into the sky, the cubs collapsed in exhaustion, their fur matted with sweat, their throats raw from restrained growls, yet their eyes burned bright. They had tasted the power of thought as weapon, and a hunger for more. Auditor sat apart, shoulders heaving He stared at the dirt map Elias had drawn hours before his claws traced lines again, and again he whispered to himself, "Retreat is not defeat, ambush is patience. A leader does not roar first." Caver left the ground, sneering, his voice carried behind him. "Tomorrow the cubs will face adults. They will remember their blood, not your games." His footsteps faded, but the challenge remained heavy. Elias looked at Arator, who raised his head with fire in his gaze. The cub spoke low so only Elias could hear. "Tomorrow we face them. And I will not be beast, I will be commander." Elias felt the weight of the words settle. He gave no smile, only a single nod to cubs had crossed a line from instinct into discipline. Tomorrow would decide if the lessons held. Tomorrow would decide if predators could learn the games of men. The night fell heavy, and the air carried a silence filled with tension. The cubs slept restless. Auditor dreamed of banners and ambush and the taste of victory, not with claw, but with thought. Elias watched the stars again, knowing the true trial was near. The sun rose over the arena, and the sky glowed crimson as though painted with blood. The vast field stretched wide, with tall grasses broken by jagged stone outcrops and shallow streams. It was a place where the Clorothi trained for war, and today it would bear witness to something no one had seen before. On one side, the predator adults stood, towering figures clad in armor marked with scars of countless hunts. Their muscles swelled, their eyes burned with certainty of victory. They had no doubt that this day would be a lesson in humiliation for the cubs and for the human who guided them. On the opposite side, the cubs waited, younger, smaller, less armored, yet their stance carried something new. Their bodies twitched with eagerness, but their eyes moved sharply, studying the terrain as Elias had taught them. Arator stood at their center, his chest rising slow and controlled. He no longer looked like a beast ready to pounce. He looked like a leader ready to command. He glanced once at Elias, who stood apart. As observer, his voice carried low, steady. "Remember discipline, patience, unity." Elias spoke only 4 words. "Do not fight them." Arator tilted his head, golden eyes narrowing, but he understood. He nodded sharply and turned back to his pack. Caver stepped forward among the adults. His massive form seemed carved of stone, his sneers spread wide and cruel. "When this is done, the council will see that humans bring only weakness. Watch as we crush these cubs in heart and spirit." He raised a clawed fist, and the signal was given. The match began. The adults charged immediately. Their heavy steps thundered across the ground, shaking earth with power. The cubs did not meet them head-on. They scattered into grass, vanishing from sight. The crowd of spectators rumbled with disapproval, and laughter to run was shame, to hide was cowardice. Yet Elias' eyes gleamed, because the cubs were not running, they were maneuvering. Arator signaled silently with claw raised high. 2 cubs darted left, drawing 2 adults away with mocking roars and thrown stones. The adults pursued, enraged, believing easy prey waited. Their armor clanked. As they gave chase, the cubs vanished behind stone ridges, and the trap closed. 3 more cubs leapt from concealment, striking not with claws, but with force enough to tag the adults, marking them out of the game. The crowd gasped at the sight. Adults removed by children. Caver snarled, fury blazing. He roared, "Face us with honor." His words carried across the arena, but the cubs ignored them. They moved with precision, shifting between cover like hunters of a different breed. They feigned weakness, retreating into streams, drawing heavy armored adults to stumble. In the mud, ambushes unfolded with ruthless efficiency, each strike executed with eerie coordination. Elias felt his chest tighten with grim satisfaction. This was not beast instinct, this was human strategy carried in alien flesh. Arator commanded from the center, never charging. First his eyes scanned terrain. His signals came swift, precise. He adapted when traps failed. He withdrew when ground was poor. He attacked when timing was perfect. One by one, the adults fell humiliated as cubs tagged him out and disappeared before retaliation could land. The spectators no longer laughed. They sat silent, breath held as history shifted before their eyes. Caver fought with growing rage. He struck down 1 cub with sheer speed, but found himself surrounded by 3 more who did not attack directly. They circled, they darted in and out, distracting, confusing him, until Arator himself appeared. His voice rang loud. Now the 3 closed from every side, touching Caver at once. The great warrior roared in fury, but the rule was clear. He was out. The silence in the arena cracked into chaos. Some adults shouted protest, some cried that the rules were trickery, others demanded the game, and Elias raised his hand for calm. His voice cut across the uproar. "This is no trick. This is discipline. This is thought over rage." He pointed at the cubs, standing tall, eyes blazing with victory. "They are not weaker, they are wiser." Arator lifted the captured banner high. His roar split the air. But it was no wild beast. Sound was controlled, filled with triumph earned by unity, not by brute claw. His pack roared with him, each voice harmonizing into a sound that shook stone. It was not just a cry of cubs. It was a declaration of a new way. Caver stood trembling with humiliation, his eyes burned on Elias. "You have broken them, you have made them less." Elias met his gaze unflinching. "No, I have made them more." The council members rose from their seats, ancient eyes wide with disbelief. For generations, no cub had ever defeated adults. For generations, strength alone had ruled. Yet now, before their eyes, children led by human thought had undone tradition. The air vibrated with the weight of the world of the Klorathi shifted on its foundation. Arichator looked at Elias across the arena, his chest heaved, but his eyes gleamed with fierce light. He shouted so all could hear. "We are not less for learning, we are more for knowing." The cubs echoed in pounding claws against earth. The adults stood in silence, shamed by children. The match ended, but the war within the Klorathi had only begun. The cubs had proven victory possible, without claw alone, and that truth could not be buried. Caver glared, vowing silently to crush this change, while Elias knew the future had already been set. The seed planted yesterday had bloomed into revolution. The crowd dispersed with murmurs, disbelief, rage, and all tangled together in the fading light. The cubs gathered around Arichator, who lifted his banner again, and said low to them, "This is only beginning." Elias heard the words and felt chill. He knew they were true. The predators had learned the games of man, and to mar the galaxy would feel the consequence. The arena lay silent after battle, but the silence was heavy, not empty. The cubs stood in the dust, panting, their chests rising with triumph. Their eyes shone with the glow of something deeper than victory. It was recognition of a path none of their kind had ever walked before. Elias Varric watched them closely, his heart steady, his face unreadable. But within him surged the weight of what had just unfolded. He had given them games, he had given them rules and patience, and they had turned those gifts into power. Arichator lowered the banner at last and stepped forward to face the adults, his claws flexed, but his voice rang clear without growl. "We prove that strength is not only in claw strength, is in mind strength, is in unity." The council members shifted in their high seats, their faces carved in stone like judgment. Caver still burned with rage, his fur bristling, his voice booming across the arena. They were cubs led astray by tricks. No honor was shown, no true fight was given. His words stirred some spectators, but others remained silent, uncertain. Elias stepped forward, his gaze on Caver. "They fought with more honor than you understand. They fought with control, with discipline. They faced you without fear, and they won." Caver bared his teeth, but the council raised a hand, silencing him. One elder leaned forward, eyes old yet sharp. "This is new to us. This is dangerous. Change always is, but can it serve us?" Elias did not answer. It was not his place. Arichator stepped into the center of the arena, shoulders straight, voice proud. "It can serve, because today we are not only cubs. Today we are warriors who think like humans, yet fight like Klorathi. We are more than either alone." The cubs roared agreement, their voices carrying like thunder. The adults looked on, some with pride, some with shame. Caver clenched his fist, fury tearing through him, but his defeat bound him in silence. For the first time, the council turned their gaze not on the adults, but on the cubs. The future stood before them, and it bore human lessons wrapped in predator flesh. As the crowd dispersed, Elias walked beside Arichator, their steps slow through the fading light. The cub leader kept his head high, but his voice lowered. "You showed us a weapon greater than falling, a weapon of the mind. I will not forget it." Elias studied him, noting the fire in his eyes and the steadiness in his stride. He spoke with quiet weight. "Remember, this fire is double-edged. It can defend your people, or it can destroy them. Choose wisely how you use it." Arichator gave a slow nod, but his voice carried certainty. "I will choose for victory." Night descended across the stone walls. The cubs sat together, whispering not of claws, but of signals, not of hunting prey, but of guarding one another. Arichator spoke to them with authority. Now they listened, they obeyed. The arrogance that once filled the air was gone, replaced by sharp focus. Elias watched from a distance, knowing the shape of a commander forming before his eyes. He thought of Earth children who once played in streets with sticks and stones, learning the first lessons of strategy. Those children had become soldiers, had become leaders, had become the spine of humanity. Across the stars, now predators were following that same path. Caver approached in the shadows, his voice a low snarl meant only for Elias. "You have shifted what should never shift. You think you have won, but you have cursed us." Elias turned to face him, eyes steady. "I gave them tools, nothing more. What they build with them is their choice." Caver spat into the dirt, his fury barely restrained. "If they rise, it will not be your victory. It will be your undoing." He vanished back into the darkness, leaving the warning behind. Elias returned his gaze to the cubs. Arichator was leading them through silent drills, marking signals, in dust, rehearsing maneuvers. With sharp precision, their bodies moved with predator grace, but their minds worked with human order. With a union strange and powerful, Elias knew what he had wrought, and he felt both pride and unease. The future was unpredictable, but the change was irreversible. When dawn came again, the cubs gathered before the council. HFY stepped forward, his head high. He declared in a voice that carried across the chamber, "We are ready to face any foe not as beasts, but as warriors of mind and body together. We will carry these lessons into our future. We will not abandon our claws, but neither will we abandon what we have learned from man." The chamber fell silent. The council deliberated long, but their eyes often returned to Elias, who stood apart still as stone. They knew what this meant for their species. They knew war itself might never be the same. At last the eldest spoke. "Then it shall be written, the cubs are warriors. The human lessons will be studied, tested, and remembered. This day marks the beginning of a new age." The declaration rippled to the hall. Like thunder, the cubs roared in triumph. The adults lowered their heads in bitter acceptance. Caver turned away, unable to meet their eyes. HFY approached Elias after the council dismissed him, his expression fierce yet respectful, his voice low. "You gave us more than games, you gave us future." Elias shook his head, his voice a whisper meant only for the cub leader. "I only showed you what was already within you. The choice to use it is yours." As the cubs departed, their steps echoed with certainty. Elias remained alone for a moment, gazing at the banners that hung from the stone walls. The thought struck him hard. Humanity had always survived by turning imagination into weapon, by turning play into practice, by turning weakness into strategy. Now he had given that legacy to predators who were already stronger, faster, deadlier. What they would become with human thought guiding their claws, no one could say. He whispered to the empty chamber, "Games are never just games." HFY stood at the entrance, looking back at him, eyes blazing with promise. His voice carried across the chamber, firm and final. "We will not forget what you gave us." Then he turned and led the cubs into the new dawn, their roars echoing into the horizon, not as beasts, but as warriors who had learned the war games of man. The sound carried far and deep, a herald of change and of the battles yet to come.